Boys, where's your spirit? I don't hear no singing. When you was slaves, you sang like birds.
Blazing Saddles is one of the boldest and most provocative comedies in American film history. It was premiered in 1974 and directed by the iconic Mel Brooks. The movie delivers a fearless attack on racism, political correctness, and even Hollywood itself. Despite the outrageous humor and wild energy, there are wild and compelling behind-the-scenes episodes that you never knew of. Let's find out. Number 20. It has several titles apart from Blazing Saddles. The legendary comedy we know today as Blazing Saddles underwent a fascinating evolution of titles that reflect its daring concept and the creative voices behind it. The movie originated in the early 1970s when producer David Begelman, then an executive with Creative Management Associates, approached Mel Brooks with the screenplay. The original treatment was provocatively titled Tex X, a clever play on the name Malcolm X. The idea behind the title was to give the film an edge and instantly signal that it was a subversive racial satire wrapped inside the structure of a classic Western. However, the title Tex X was considered too politically charged and possibly confusing for audiences unfamiliar with the reference or uncomfortable with its implications. As they began to develop the script under multiple writers, the working title was changed to Black Bart, which was more literal and descriptive of the main character's role. Interestingly, this title persisted long enough to leave its mark on the film's production. Ultimately, the film was retitled once more to the now iconic Blazing Saddles, a name that evoked the wild and fiery spirit of the story without being too precise. The title was chosen by Mel Brooks, who wanted something that felt outrageous and comically dramatic. Therefore, from Tex X to Black Bart to Blazing Saddles, the journey of the film's title is a reflection of the daring, boundary-pushing spirit that defined the movie itself. Number 19. Richard Pryor only helped write the script. Many people assume Richard Pryor starred in Blazing Saddles, but he never actually appeared in the film. Mel Brooks originally wanted Pryor to play the lead role of Bart, the black railroad worker who became sheriff of the racist frontier town of Rock Ridge. Brooks believed that Pryor was not only the best choice, but the boldest one. However, Warner Brothers executives disagreed with him. Pryor's reputation was a big risk. He was known for his unapologetic style, his past substance use, and for walking off stage during performances if he wasn't feeling the audience. The studio feared he was too much of a risk to anchor a big-budget comedy. They were also concerned about the film's already controversial racial themes and worried that Pryor's involvement would only amplify potential backlash. Despite being rejected for the lead role, Mel Brooks still hired Pryor as part of the film's writing team. The role of Bart ultimately went to Cleavon Little. While Cleavon Little gave a memorable and beloved performance, fans often wonder what the film would have looked like with Pryor in the role. Ironically, his writing helped make Blazing Saddles the biting, culturally significant film it became, even without his presence on screen. Number 18. The film was written on the 6th floor of 666 Fifth Avenue in New York City. With its 666 marker, the number popularly associated with the devil, the team was afraid and thought they were creating something doomed from the start. Brooks recalled in interviews how he and his co-writers would often comment that the mark of the beast above the door practically guaranteed the film would be cursed. Their creative process for the film was as unpredictable as the film itself. The team brought out their best, combining hard work and humor to make the process smooth for everyone. The mood in the room could shift from hysterical to hostile and back again. It was more like a writer's war zone than a calm, organized writing room. Despite the effort and genius that went into writing, Mel Brooks and the team weren't convinced that Blazing Saddles would actually succeed. Financially, the film was a tight-budget operation by Hollywood standard. Brooks estimated that it cost around $2.5 million to produce, a relatively modest sum even in the 1970s. Surprisingly, the film grossed over $100 million at the box office. However, Brooks only saw about $50,000 for writing and directing the movie. This is because the deal he signed with Warner Brothers wasn't structured to give him a major back-end cut, and he often joked that for creating one of the biggest comedy blockbusters of all time, I got cab fare. The fears of the writing team were proved wrong. Blazing Saddles became a runaway hit, was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, and forever altered the landscape of comedy and film. This cinema hit was made in that cramped, haunted-feeling office on the 6th floor of 666 Avenue. Number 17. The studio tried to cut the campfire fart scene, but Mel Brooks fought to keep it. One of the most groundbreaking moments in Blazing Saddles is the campfire scene where a group of cowboys, after eating plates of beans, erupted into a loud, extended series of farts. Blazing Saddles marked the first time a fart recording had been used in cinema. Mel Brooks came up with the idea after noticing that cowboys in westerns were always consuming lots of black coffee and baked beans, a deadly combination around the campfire if there ever was one. Those fart noises were made by using a little soap, and the old stand by putting one's hand under their armpit. As he later explained in interviews, Brooks wanted to portray the romanticized image of cowboys in westerns. If cowboys were really sitting around stuffing themselves with beans, there would be gas. However, Warner Brothers executives were horrified when they saw the scene in the rough cut. They insisted that the entire segment be removed. According to Brooks, one executive said, "You can't have that, it's disgusting, it's not even funny." However, Brooks disagreed. He believed that the scene was not only hilarious but essential, and they believed that the fart scene exposed the ugly, ridiculous underbelly of traditional American storytelling. In the end, Brooks fought tooth and nail to keep the scene in. He refused to back down. When the film premiered, audiences howled with laughter during the flatulence sequence. The sheer unexpectedness stunned people. It became one of the most talked about scenes in the movie and is now one of its most iconic moments. Number 16. Gene Wilder playing the role of the Waco Kid was not originally planned, but a trade-off. Gene Wilder only agreed to do Blazing Saddles on the condition that Mel Brooks consider his movie idea, Young Frankenstein. The role of the Waco Kid was originally intended for another actor, the late, great Gig Young. Young was a solid fit, but he had a severe drinking problem in real life. On his very first day of shooting, Young tried to perform his scenes while visibly under the influence. During his first take, he suddenly began sweating profusely and collapsed on set. The crew was beyond shocked. Mel Brooks immediately recognized that Young was in no condition to work, and after confirming that his collapse was alcohol-related, he had no choice but to fire him. Now, in a panic with filming underway and some major characters not yet cast, Brooks had no choice but to call his longtime friend and collaborator Gene Wilder. Wilder had previously worked with Brooks on a hit and was known for his deep commitment to character and story. However, getting Wilder to come aboard Blazing Saddles and save the role wasn't easy. Wilder agreed to come only if Brooks could grant him one very specific request. He told Brooks, "I'll do it if you'll read my script." That script was a comedic homage that Wilder had been working on quietly. At the time, Brooks had never heard of the idea and wasn't entirely sure it would work. However, he respected Wilder enough to take a look. After reading the script and laughing all the way through, Brooks agreed that not only would he read the script, but he would also direct the film if they could get it made. So, Wilder flew out to the set of Blazing Saddles in Burbank, California, and began filming his scenes as the Waco Kid. Number 15. The studio wanted to cut most of the offensive jokes, but Mel Brooks refused. Blazing Saddles was originally intended to be a controversial film. Mel Brooks wanted to create a comedy that challenged racism, mocked Hollywood stereotypes, and pushed social boundaries. However, when Warner Brothers executives saw the first cut, they fiercely disagreed. Brooks later recalled that one executive said to him, "You can't be serious, this can't go to theaters, we'll be sued, protested, or worse." The studio drafted a list of over 20 scenes or lines they wanted Brooks to remove or alter before release. Some executives wanted to sanitize the film entirely, while others thought it could be toned down into a more acceptable comedy. Mel Brooks never gave in to their sentiments. He believed the satire only worked if it was delivered without compromise. Every joke was there for a reason, no matter how outrageous it might be. It aims to highlight and destroy the hypocrisy of American racism, classism, and cultural double standards. Eventually, studio executives relented, but only after extensive test screenings. Only a few very small cuts were made, mostly for time and pacing, not for content. Blazing Saddles was released in February 1974, and despite its controversy, it became a massive box office hit. Number 14. The infamous horse punch scene sparked backlash from animal rights activists. One of the most talked about moments in Blazing Saddles was when the character Mongo, a towering brute, punched a horse square in the face. The animal dropped to the ground in dramatic slow motion, and the crowd gasped. It was a moment that not everyone found funny. Although the whole thing was delivered with deadpan comic timing, the gag didn't sit well with everyone. As soon as the film hit theaters in 1974, Mel Brooks and Warner Brothers began receiving angry letters and phone calls from viewers who were concerned about animal cruelty. Animal rights activists quickly accused the production of harming the animal for the sake of a laugh. However, what most people didn't realize was that no animal was harmed in the making of the scene. Mel Brooks and the production team had gone to great lengths to train the horses so that the stunt could be performed safely. The incident is now an example of how the film constantly tested boundaries, not just of race, politics, and decency, but also of audience sensitivity. Number 13, Frankie Lane sang the theme song, but no one told him it was a comedy. Mel Brooks wanted the film's title song to sound authentic, like something straight out of a John Ford or Howard Hawks epic. He didn't want the music to give away to the audience that the film was a parody. So when it was time to record the title track, Brooks brought in Frankie Lane for his unmistakable voice and classic Western sound. According to Brooks, Lane showed up to the recording session unaware of the film's comedic nature. When he was handed the lyrics, he sang them with absolute passion and intensity, as if he were scoring a serious Western song about honor, justice, and dusty trails. Brooks, in his typical style, never corrected him. He later explained that the song worked so well precisely because Lane believed it was sincere. The serious tone of the song contrasted perfectly with the irreverent madness that followed. Lane's contribution became an iconic part of the film's identity. The theme was even nominated for a Golden Globe Best Original Song in 1975. Number 12, Hedy Lamarr sued Mel Brooks over the character name Hedley Lamarr. Blazing Saddles was packed with ridiculous characters and over-the-top names, but one of the most hilarious was Hedley Lamarr, the villain political schemer played by Harvey Korman. Throughout the film, characters continuously and intentionally mispronounced his name as Hedy, much to his exasperation. This became a running gag, with Hedley constantly snapping back, "It's Hedley, not Hedy!" However, while the line made the audience laugh, the real Hedy Lamarr didn't find it amusing at all. Hollywood's glamorous screen legend Hedy Lamarr was an Austrian-born actress and inventor known for her striking beauty and her contributions to science. By the early 90s, she had retired from the public eye, but her name and legacy still held significant weight in entertainment circles. When she learned that Mel Brooks had named a sleazy, bumbling villain in a major comedy film Hedley Lamarr, she was not pleased. According to reports, Lamarr felt the use of her name, especially in a context that mocked it, was damaging to her reputation. She filed a lawsuit against Brooks and Warner Brothers, claiming that her name had been used without her permission and that it constituted an unauthorized commercial exploitation of her persona. Number 11, Slim Pickens had no idea what kind of movie he was in. Slim Pickens played Taggart, the dim-witted but loyal henchman to Hedley Lamarr in Blazing Saddles. His performance, full of physical humor and deadpan delivery, perfectly embodied the clueless brute stereotype that Mel Brooks was so eager to portray. However, what made Pickens' role even more hilarious was that he had no idea the film was a comedy. Pickens had spent decades in the film industry playing roles in straightforward, often serious westerns. Brooks specifically sought him out for Blazing Saddles because he wanted that authenticity. He didn't want a comedian playing the part of a cowboy. He wanted a real cowboy who could deliver lines with sincerity and gravity, which would make the absurdity around him even funnier. That was exactly what Slim Pickens delivered. However, part of the magic came from the fact that Pickens played the role completely straight. He reportedly didn't read the entire script and wasn't aware it was supposed to be a comedy. Number 10. Governor Lepetamain was named after a real-life flatulence performer. The character, Governor William J. Lepetamain, was played by Mel Brooks himself. He was a bumbling, self-important politician who could barely remember what state he governed and was constantly distracted by women, food, or nonsense. However, what the audience didn't realize was that his name, Lepetamain, wasn't just made up for laughs. It was actually a tribute to one of the strangest performers in European history. Governor Lepetamain was named after Joseph Pujol, a 19th-century French entertainer who performed under the stage name Lepetamain. This stage name is a French play on words combining the verb péto, which means to fart, with the suffix main from Latin mania, used to indicate madness or obsession. Mel Brooks, who loved all kinds of comedy, clearly enjoyed the strange but funny story of the real Lepetamain. By naming the governor Lepetamain, he made a clever joke, calling him a fart maniac. It was the perfect name for a goofy, clueless politician who was full of hot air and not in touch with reality. Number 9. Mel Brooks played multiple roles in the film. Mel Brooks didn't just write and direct Blazing Saddles, he also stepped in front of the camera to play two major characters, Governor William J. Lepetamine and the Yiddish-speaking Native American chief. Brooks's acting as Governor Lepetamine was a scene-stealing mix of foolishness and art. However, he didn't stop there. One of the film's most absurd scenes showed a group of Native Americans allowing the black family of Bart to pass unharmed. The tribal leader hilariously spoke Yiddish. That chief was also played by Brooks. Brooks even considered playing a third major role as Hedley Lamar himself. However, he eventually decided to cast Harvey Korman instead, a move that proved wise, as Korman brought comedic timing and villainous flair to the part. Brooks later humorously said he realized he was already too busy being governor. Number 8. The scene where Bart pulled a gun on himself came from Mel Brooks' childhood mischief. One of the most memorable and hilarious scenes in Blazing Saddles was when Sheriff Bart outsmarted a racist mob by pretending to take himself hostage. It was a brilliant act that exposed how people can be misled when driven by fear or ignorance. However, what the viewers didn't know was that this entire scene was inspired by a real event from Mel Brooks' childhood. While Brooke was growing up in Brooklyn, he was no stranger to mischief. At 9 years old, he went into a local drugstore and stole a pack of gum and a small toy water pistol. When the store clerk realized what young Mel had done, he confronted him. However, instead of simply apologizing or dropping the stolen items, little Brooks pulled out the water pistol he had just stolen and pointed it at the clerk to bluff his way out of the situation by holding up the store with a toy gun. The clerk was not impressed or scared, and Brooks had to return the items. Brooks never forgot how ridiculous the moment was. That moment of childish desperation and absurd thinking stayed with him for decades. When writing Blazing Saddles years later, Brooks used that memory as the basis for one of the film's most iconic scenes. Sheriff Bart pulling a gun on himself wasn't just a clever gag. It was a reflection of young Mel's hilarious attempt to bluff his way out of trouble. Number 7. Mel Brooks offered John Wayne a role and got a legendary response. When Brooks and his team were working on the Warner Brothers studio lot, he happened to run into John Wayne, who had heard that Brooks was making a new kind of Western wild comedy, racial satire, and fart jokes. Wayne curiously approached Brooks and asked about the project. Brooks, seizing the opportunity, offered Wayne a copy of the script right then and there, and the next day offered him a cameo role in the film. It would have been a chance to have the most legendary figure in Westerns appear in the most outrageous parody of the genre. However, John Wayne read the script, laughed, and famously told Brooks, "No, I can't do a movie like that, but I'll be first in line to see it." Brooks respected Wayne's decision and never pushed him further. He was happy that Wayne read the script and supported the film. True to his word, John Wayne did show up to see it when it hit theaters. Number 6. Mel Brooks asked Madeline Kahn to show her legs during the audition. One of the interesting characters in Blazing Saddles is Lily von Stupp. When Mel Brooks was casting that role, he already had his eye on Madeline Kahn. He had seen her in the movie Paper Moon and thought she was hilarious and incredibly talented. During her audition, Mel Brooks surprised Kahn by asking her to lift her skirt and show her legs. Although she was nervous, she managed to do it. Brooks made it clear that it wasn't just about having nice legs, but he needed to make sure she was okay being sexy and playful on screen. This was because the character would wear revealing costumes and act in a flirtatious manner. Kahn ultimately brought perfection to the role. She was funny, confident, and stole every scene she was in. Her performance was so outstanding that she even received an Oscar nomination. That marked the beginning of her collaboration with Brooks on additional films. Even though his audition request might seem strange today, it helped him see that Kahn was the perfect person for the role. Number 5. Some characters were inspired by animated figures. Mongo is one of the most unforgettable characters in Blazing Saddles. He is a huge, muscle-bound brute who punched a horse and then became unexpectedly sweet and thoughtful. This amazing character was played by former NFL star Alex Karras. He is scary and hilarious, a mix that makes the character truly stand out. Mel Brooks loved cartoons and animated slapstick, so he drew on his love of classic animation to help shape the tone of the movie, especially in Mongo. The character was heavily inspired by the kind of oversized, dim-witted but lovable tough guys often seen in old Looney Tunes cartoons. Mongo was designed to be a walking cartoon character in real life. From his exaggerated strength to his simple, childlike behavior, everything fit that mold. Even the way Mongo interacted with others was cartoon-like. His famous line, "Mongo only pawned in the game of life," is unexpectedly deep and shows that underneath the brawn there's a gentle soul. Number 4. The joke. "Badges, we don't need no stinkin' badges," is a brilliant classic Hollywood quote. One of the most quoted lines from Blazing Saddles is, "Badges, we don't need no stinkin' badges." This line became famous because of Blazing Saddles. However, it was actually a parody of a much older quote. The old one originated from a classic 1948 movie called The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, directed by John Huston and starring Humphrey Bogart. The line, as delivered in the original film, became a piece of movie history and was parodied and referenced many times afterward, but never more memorable than in Blazing Saddles. Mel Brooks and his team, who were well-versed in Hollywood history, knew the quote's significance. What made the line so effective in Blazing Saddles was that it perfectly matched the movie's overall style, breaking the fourth wall, playing with genre conventions, and making references that fans of film history would catch. To this day, "Badges, we don't need no stinkin' badges" is one of the most quoted lines from The Treasure of the Sierra Madre and Blazing Saddles. Number 3. Burton Gilliam struggled with the N-word scene until Cleavon Little reassured him. Making Blazing Saddles was very sensitive due to the heavy use of racial slurs, particularly the N-word, which was deliberately included to expose and ridicule racism, not to support it. However, it wasn't easy for some of the actors to say those words. One of the actors who had that difficulty was Burton Gilliam, who played the crass and dim-witted cowboy Lyle. Gilliam's character is among the group of men who constantly use racial slurs when referring to Bart, the black sheriff played by Cleavon Little. Gilliam had no acting experience before his breakout role in Paper Moon, so when he read the script for Blazing Saddles and saw how many times he would have to use the N-word, he was deeply uncomfortable. He reportedly approached Mel Brooks and Cleavon Little privately to express his concerns. Cleavon Little, however, pulled Gilliam aside and calmly said something like, "Look, I know this is just acting. If I thought for a second you meant any of it, we'd go to the first city. But we're doing this to make a bigger point. So don't worry, go for it." Cleavon's words helped Gilliam relax and perform his role without guilt. Cleavon understood the purpose of the satire and was able to help his fellow actors see the larger message behind the offensive language. Number 2. The movie didn't test well with the studio. When Mel Brooks finished shooting Blazing Saddles, he knew he had created something bold, wild, and unlike anything Hollywood had seen before. However, that didn't mean the studio executives were on the same page with him. The same thing happened during the first official test screening of the movie for Warner Brothers executives. Blazing Saddles was anything but safe. It mocked racism, shattered political correctness, and broke nearly every rule in the Hollywood industry. The jokes were crude, loud, and in your face. During the test screening, the studio audience sat stone-faced. The movie was supposed to be a comedy, but the studio executives met it with silence instead of laughter. They were stunned, but not in a good way. They began to worry the movie would offend too many people or completely flop at the box office. Some even suggested shelving the film or cutting major portions to tone it down. However, Mel Brooks proved that their fears would never come true by arranging another screening, not for executives, but for the everyday workers on the Warner Brothers lot. These were the individuals who constructed the sets and maintained the studio's operations behind the scenes. They cared less about politics or studio image. All they wanted was good entertainment. The experience at the second screening was completely different from the first. The audience laughed uproariously from start to finish. They cackled at the fart scene around the campfire, hooted at the crude jokes, and cheered for Sheriff Bart and the rest of the cast. It was clear that the film struck a chord with ordinary people in a way the executives hadn't expected. After witnessing that response, the studio changed its mind. Warner Brothers executives finally agreed to release the film, although they remained nervous. Brooks, however, proved that the movie was made for the people, not the critics in the boardroom. Sure enough, when Blazing Saddles was released in 1974, it became a massive success. Number 1. Guests rode horseback to the movie's premiere. Blazing Saddles' premiere was not the conventional movie premiere where guests attend a red carpet show at a fancy Hollywood theater. Mel Brooks and the Warner Brothers team decided to lean fully into the film's outrageous Western-themed spirit. They planned something that fit the movie's wild and rebellious tone. So the premiere was held at the Pickwick Drive-In Theater in Burbank, California. But that is not all. They planned the event in such a way that it captured the cowboy setting and portrayal of classic westerns. Many of the guests who came, including members of the cast and crew, actually rode in on horseback. They left their limousines and luxury cars and arrived on saddles and reins, dressed in Western gear and boots, just like characters from the movie. It was hilarious to behold, and that publicity stunt remains a tribute to the film's irreverent energy. Seeing guests arrive at the entrance on horseback set the tone perfectly for the kind of movie everyone was about to watch. It made the experience feel accessible and grounded, which agreed with Mel Brooks's belief that the movie was made for ordinary people, not just critics or executives. The horseback premiere became one of the most memorable Hollywood openings of its time, and it captured exactly what Blazing Saddles was all about. Even 50 years after its premiere, Blazing Saddles has remained one of the most iconic American comic films ever. What did you learn from the movie, and what was your favorite part? Share with us in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.